Welcome to the Psychedelic-Revolution with your host Magic Man, brought to you by the Rising Consciousness Community. I'm really excited. I have a great guest today. I'm excited to introduce Beth Bell. Beth is an author, a entrepreneur, and an advisor, and has been on a spiritual journey of her own for her whole life, and has recently we connected at a conscious medicine conference that was incredible, and we really had a nice conversation, and I wanted to bring Beth on so we could learn from her and her wisdom. So welcome, Beth. Nice to see you
Thank
today.
you. Yes, I'm so happy that the universe aligned us and that we met at that conference and that we're here today. So it's fun.
Yeah, what was your highlight of that conference?
Honestly, I know all those guys in that conference, guys, women. And I went because I just wanted to be in the room filled with high conscious people. Like I wanted to be in that energy because I feel like we walk out on the street every day and there's just so much low vibrational energy. And I just wanted to be in that community. So for me, to be honest, just being in the room and being in high vibe was my purpose for going. Gosh, there were so many things that were talked about during that conference that, I don't know that I could recap them, but some really cutting edge stuff because I felt like I knew all their material, and they brought some stuff that I didn't know. So that was really fun to hear what's going on and some of the discussions about AI and, Greg Braden brought a lot of that, and, quantum physics and all that stuff was just good stuff.
Yeah, the vibration. I love when they take the vibration of energy and break it into a scientific
Yes.
form, when it's like, this is not only something we feel and acknowledge, but is actually true scientifically, of what we experience is now proven with
Yeah.
math, essentially. I really found probably the thought that I keep going back to myself in that conference was the Friday night talk,
Mm,
about the mathematical equation ratio of how a proton can be scaled to a black hole, and
yes.
vice versa. So inside of us is a scaled version of the center of the universe. And that seemed to
Yeah.
be a theme throughout the conference, which I've been meditating on and thinking about a lot since then, which has been really,
Yeah.
really, and it makes you feel really happy at the end of the day, to be like you're connected to everything, and these mental worries that come up are really nothing to worry about in the big picture.
They're not. And 20 plus years, I would say like my real spiritual deep dive started, and I call it my soul quickening. And it was all kind of catapulted by an awakening kiss, to be honest. But um, when I started diving into like quantum physics books and all these spirituality things and consciousness, I was like, how is it possible that like the news doesn't have this on like every night? Like science, can prove God, or whatever you want to call God, the universe, source energy, and it's so unbelievable when you dive into it and you're like, wow, all this exists. Like, why aren't we all talking about this instead of all the other illusions that are out there about politics and, viruses and crazy stuff? So yeah, so that is so nice when we go to those conferences and get the real deal. Science and spirituality is just absolutely married, and I think there is proof of God, if you will.
So what do you mean by a spirituality kiss? I've never heard that term before. So
Oh,
let's dive in.
awakening kiss.
Awakening
Awakening
kiss.
kiss. Yes. Well, I was married at the time, and I felt like I had the white picket fence and everything was perfect, although of course it wasn't. And growing up in the Midwest, I think we kind of learn as women to just suck it up and work hard, be humble, and do what makes others happy. And so I started to realize through this kiss that I was living an illusionary life, and that the person that I was with was not a bad person. It's just that that person wasn't on my journey to help me with my soul's plan. And it was aligned maybe with some aspects of my ego's plan. And when I was kissed at 30,000 feet, I realized how asleep my body was, my soul was. Like the depths of my soul just woke up at a cellular level. And it really, at the end of the day, wasn't about that person, and it wasn't really about the kiss, other than, it was something that, yeah, it just ignited the energy within, whatever you want, the my kundalini, lots of, we could describe it a lot of different ways. I mean, of course, back then, it was just a, oh my gosh, that was an incredible wake up kiss. And now I look back at it so fondly, and realize that it was like one of those moments where I kind of look at my guardian angels and think they're up there going, she's not getting it, she's not getting it. And then they just go wham, let's hit her. And then that led to me, that night recognizing that I needed to get a divorce. And that was a tough deal for me, because I did have a lot of the things in the marriage that were very desirable in, the third dimension. And yeah, it all looked great, and it felt like it should be great, but it wasn't the marriage that was going to help my soul really feel comfortable on planet Earth, or to live my life's passion and purpose. So yeah, so that just, that took me into a whole different space in my life, because then I got divorced, and then my soul was quickening, and I was like taking in all the material that, that I wanted to read about, conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, Amit Goswami, the quantum physicist, I was reading stuff that I had no idea that I would be interested in. So it was a pretty interesting time in my life to kind of, turn my whole life upside down and feel so clear and so guided from, source, that I was on the right path to do something that felt, in many people's eyes, probably not the right thing. So, yeah.
Right. So I take it that was not your husband that you were kissing at 30,000 feet.
It was not my husband at 30,000 feet. No,
I
no, but I knew instantly, like that was the kicker. I didn't pursue that relationship until I left my husband. Cause I just felt like, from an integrity standpoint, I wasn't looking to find somebody else to make me feel better. Before, leaving, I knew it was a wake up call, and I needed to heed the call, or I wasn't gonna make the jumps in life that I was, destined to do.
Right. And then, so did that lead you to psychedelics, or when did you discover
No.
psychedelics in your life, and what was that
Yeah.
like? Or maybe walk us through the process of it.
Okay.
How do we go from
Yeah.
the 30,000 kiss, and what happened next?
Yeah. Well, stop me, because I can tell long stories, but I mean, it's been just everybody listening, I'm sure, on your show has their story and their journey. And I was in big pharma as an executive, and like drugs, even though I was marketing like legal drugs, like other drugs were an absolute no-go all my life, other than like occasional alcohol use. I just had a huge judgment against them. Psychedelics, no way. I grew up in the 70s. I mean, there was the whole narrative, the war on drugs, right? I mean, who was
Mhm.
so I had all of that programmed in my mind. And I went, 20 plus years, ended up leaving, not only my husband, but eventually left my corporate life. I was living in Singapore, working in big pharma, ended up, going to India for a while. There's a whole story about that. That's in my book, Sleeping with the Devil chapter. And then ended up in Bali, and was there 5.5 years as an entrepreneur, had a brick and mortar shop on Monkey Forest Road. And so through that whole time, I was really heavily immersed in books and seminars, and anything Hay House was doing, I was doing. Anything Deepak and Wayne Dyer and all those guys were doing, like I was Greg Braden's and Bruce Lipton's. I was all over that stuff, just soaking it up like a sponge. Well, by the time I got to Bali, I then was immersing myself in all these different modalities, because, even though I had a shop and a business and I was busy, I was doing family constellation sessions. I was doing breath work. I was doing, crystal bowls, and I mean, you name it, Ubud Bali has it. It's sort of like the Disneyland of, spiritual modalities. So I got to really immerse myself. And then on top of all of that, in Bali, I mean, of course, Mother Nature is everywhere. This, source energy is everywhere. But when you're in a place like Bali, and the jungle and the rice fields, it's just, it just really envelops you and just takes you in and holds you tight. And so that was such an incredible time in my life. And so at some point I decided that I would come back to the US, because my parents are aging and my nephews are growing older. And I'm like, I can live abroad later. So I brought my business online and came back to the US. And then a dear friend of mine had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she she said that she got exposed to the opportunity to do MDMA, and she's also someone who is anti-drugs. So she did the MDMA, and it changed the entire trajectory of her breast cancer. So she said, Beth, I really think you should try this. And I was like, yeah, no, I think I'm really good. Like, the last thing I want to do is undo, all the spiritual work that I've done for the last 20 years. So I really was like, yeah, no. And at that point in time, I was like, and why would I want to lose my mind? Right.
You still
And
thought
so,
that was going to happen with it.
right. Because of course, like, that's our identity, is our mind, right? Our identity is, all of these touch points of who we think we are until we finally realize who we really are. And so at the same time, I was doing a show called Pollinating the Planet with Love, and I was interviewing conscious entrepreneurs living their life's passion and purpose. And one of the people that I got to interview was Louis Schwartzberg, who is the famous time-lapse cinematographer. He also did Fantastic Fungi, and most people know that documentary. And during the interview, I want to talk all about the flowers, because I'm a flower whisperer. I have a relationship with flowers where, really it was the universe's way to just quiet my mind, because I couldn't meditate. And so flowers and Mother Nature became, really great teachers for me. And so I was super excited to interview Louis. And I wanted to talk about flowers. He wanted to talk all about mushrooms, because he just launched the documentary. And then we started talking about San Pedro and ayahuasca. And so I was just, really curious about his opinion. And he said, Beth, like, if you get the right set and setting, you should definitely, try these medicines. And I was kind of like, okay, well, I walked away. And then just as I was editing that episode, I got a call about a San Pedro ceremony. And I was kind of like, I know the power of flowers. I know the power of Mother Nature. Like, why am I scared of a little cactus? So I signed up to go and just had an incredible journey. It was so soft. And so, I'm happy to share any of the details, but that's how I got into psychedelics. And now I'm a psychedelic spokesperson. I've got psychedelics on my book. It's, and for me, as someone coming from the prairies of North Dakota, having a really, highly visible corporate life, it was a bit scary at first when Spirit told me to put that on the cover. I'm like, are you serious? And Spirit said, yeah, we're serious. So here it is. And here I am. And here you are. We're all here to help raise consciousness, expand consciousness on the planet.
And what's the title of your book? And why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, since we brought it up?
Yeah, it's Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions. So it's my awakening journey. I wrote it not so much because I wanted everyone to know all of my stuff, and I do go into some pretty deep, vulnerable stories in the book. I wrote it because I know that how we connect with other people is through our stories, and we learn from each other. And so it's really, my intention is to help inspire others to either get on their awakening journey or go deeper on their awakening journey. And also to know that we're not alone, because sometimes it gets tough. It's like you feel like a unicorn, because you're like, how is everybody else not getting this? But they're not, and they're fully asleep. And in some ways think that they're happily asleep, as I was before the awakening kiss. And working on the railroad, and being in the third dimensional matrix. And so it's really intended to help inspire others to just keep going on their journey as well, and for all of us to join together.
Great. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is a flower whisperer?
Yeah. Well, I was in my corporate life, and I knew meditation was something I needed to do. Everybody that I read about, meditate. And I'm like, oh, if I could, right? I mean, I would sit for 15 minutes in the morning, and I'd be like, how am I going to get that 15 minutes back? Like, I could have gotten some things done. I just couldn't quiet my mind. I just couldn't quiet my mind. And in corporate life, we also get really rewarded for our minds, right? We get rewarded for strategies, if then thinking, options, scenarios. And so I had such a challenge with that. And then I went on a trip to Hawaii, and just before I went, I happened to buy a really nice camera, because this was before we had like great cameras on. I don't even think we had iPhones actually at this point, but went to Hawaii, had this nice camera, was on my way to the beach, and saw these orchids and started photographing them. And this camera could take really good up close photos. And then I became mesmerized by these flowers and the energy, and oh, it was just like, I mean, addictive in such a good way. And so I just carried my camera everywhere for work, for pleasure. And I would photograph flowers. And I started to realize, oh, I think this is the universe's sneaky way of getting me to meditate, right? Or helping me at least know the experience of meditation. And then as my mind quieted, I started to get messages from the flowers. And so that's how I became known as the flower whisperer, because I was like hearing messages. Well, at the end of the day, there's still just messages from my higher self, right? Because when we quiet our mind, then we can hear our soul speak. But the vibration of the flowers definitely has an impact on us, whether it's, visually, sensually, through scent, sight, smell. And so, yeah, it just became a really fun thing for me to do. And I still photograph flowers today, maybe not quite as much as I did before, but I absolutely love what Mother Nature shows us. And I think sometimes we just take it for granted. I mean, an acorn doesn't worry about how it's going to grow into an oak tree, right? And if we could just take on that same mentality of surrender in a powerful way, like a lot of people think about surrender as like some weak thing. Yeah, and it's not that. It's surrendering into the flow of the energy, which is also something that psychedelics help us do, right? Shuts off that default mode network, shuts down the amygdala. It's like it's either fear or love, and gets us right into that love space and into the truth of who we are, not all these storylines that we either built ourselves or got programmed with from childhood, or some of it's our ancestral programming, right? It comes down through the lineage, and it could be from many generations previously, or our star seeds, or wherever we pull some of these third dimensional thought constructs into our energy system. So yeah, so that's the flower whisperer story. It's just a lot of fun, and I encourage people to just take advantage of Mother Nature. It's just sitting there, like, it has so much wisdom and knowledge to share, and we walk by a flower and don't even look at it sometimes. So yeah, it's an easy way to just get into the zone.
There's a really nice Buddhist meditation I learned around flowers as well, and I love flowers as well. But you look at the flower, and you can give that flower to the Buddha as well, and
Yeah.
just spread that message of your appreciation for the flower from that creation, but also say, here's a flower for, you place it at a Buddha's feet, or
Yeah.
in your mind, and share that flower. So you're walking through a field of flowers, and you can be like, here's the flowers I'm collecting to give to the Buddha, just in your mind.
Yeah.
Which is a really nice way to be
I like that.
grateful.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So let's go into the San Pedro journey, and what that was like for you, and as when you went to take the medicine, and
Yeah.
what you were thinking and how you were feeling, and then what you experienced.
Yeah. Well, I went with an open mind as much as I could, not having done any psychedelics.
And this was like how long ago?
Gosh, 3 years ago, maybe. So I'm still relatively new in the psychedelic realm. But I feel, as we all do, once we have our ego death, I think we transcend into a different, a different knowledge embodiment level, if I could say it like that. So I went with a little bit of intrepidation, because I really felt like, oh, I've worked so hard on my own, and I just feel like I shouldn't have to go to drugs, to do this. And, what if it's addictive? And what if because sometimes, even without having done any psychedelics, I felt like I was in the celestial realms a lot. And I didn't really like being on planet Earth sometimes. And it wasn't that my life was bad. It was just like, it's just boring here. And it's like a lower vibrational field. And you're just like, So I was worried that maybe I would just want to go out there more. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to the session, and I had vetted. I mean, the other thing that I talk about a lot is how important it is to vet where you're going to be, right? The setting, and server. So I knew the server. I had taken a friend there for a ceremony, I don't know what it was, a month before or whatever. So I had met the people, I had seen the location. I had a good lay of the land and the energy. And so that when I got there, I felt safe. Like I knew that I was there with an intentional group of people, not people that are just going to shoot themselves out there and not do the integration work afterwards. So I get there, and I'm like, I'm not going to talk to anybody, because I don't want to like overlap energies. Like I was all worried, about that stuff. And I just want to make sure it's, just a clean, here's my intentions. And so I kind of was a little bit to myself. And I remember I was sitting next to this lady, and she looks over at me and she's like, hi. And I'm like, hi. And she goes, I always feel like I'm taking a shortcut when I do this. And it was like so weird because I was just thinking that. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I taking a shortcut? Should I not be taking a shortcut? Is this wrong? And so I just kind of laughed at myself because it's just the mind, right? Evaluating, judging. And then they basically were serving the San Pedro, and I'm a big matcha tea drinker. So I actually I guess I love that bitterness. And so for me, I had no problem drinking down the San Pedro. Other people were gagging and it was a little bit like, oh, okay. But I loved it. So drank that. And then, the lesson, or not the lesson, but the instructions was don't do everything you can to not throw it up for at least 40 minutes. And after that, you can throw up anywhere you want, just not in the swimming pool. So I'm like, okay. And I remembered my friend had said that she fought the throw up thing the entire time, and she made her own trip very miserable because she was still trying to be in that control of like, I'm not going to throw up or whatever. So it was good for me to hear, because then I'm like, yep, okay, whenever that happens. So I went and sat out on the patio, and I was sitting in like this chair, this swing outside, and my mind was, it was like, it did not want to lose its job, right? So it's like, you don't even know like who these people are, and don't let go because you don't know what's going to happen and it might not be safe. And it was like, seriously, okay. So I'm just sitting there, just relax. And then there was this beautiful like little veil that was like a real veil, like a piece of fabric, but like one of those that's almost see-through. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of came and it just went right here on my shoulder, and I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, I'm connected. Oh, I'm connected to this. And then like, oh, it was like spirit was just like gently guiding me in and just saying, oh yes, you're part of everything. And I was like, oh, okay. And then there was just like this message, like, we're here. And I was like, oh, okay. And because I've done a lot of not other medicines at that point, but a lot of other modalities, and I've spoken to a lot of entities and people and spirits on the other side, that wasn't scary for me or anything. So I was like, oh, like I had familiarity. I'm like, oh, I know who you are, Mm-hmm. And so I sat there and just kind of really just started to feel into it. And then eventually I was like, oh yeah, I think I might feel ill. And I'm like, well, I think I don't want to throw up in front of everybody. So I went out and sat out on a rock and, just kind of waited. And then they came around and said, do you want to do the second serving? And I just knew. I was just like, yes, I do. And so I went in and took that. And then I would say that that's really where I felt more into the whole journey and was able to just lay there. And I had a lot of kaleidoscope. It was the first time that I'd seen the artwork in other places, but the first time that I actually saw the beauty and the dimensional aspect of everything. And I just laid there and I actually shook for a really long time. I just like, just massive shaking, right? But it was like one of those things where if you looked at it from the outside, you might think it looked a little bit violent, but it felt so incredible. And one of my intentions was to get a super cellular soul scrub. And so I feel like that's what San Pedro was doing. It was just going into every bit of my body and shaking it out. And one of the things I had done in Bali was I had gone to a shaking ashram with Ratu Bagus. And, we shook for 3 sessions a day for 2 hours a piece. So 6 hours a day. I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever done. And so all of that was kind of coming back to me like, oh yeah, I get it now. I get this shaking thing. And so, yeah, I just had an incredible, I sat with the High Council, had lots of interesting discussions. And at one point they come around and people holding the space, how are you doing? And I was just like, my jaw was just like wired shut. I was like, I am just not here to speak. I'm not here to talk. And I always love talking. As you can tell, I love sharing about journeys, but I was like, there is nothing to share right now. I'm just in this. And yeah, it was just incredible. It was really, really incredible, that first journey. And it's interesting too. And I know you know this because you've done journeys, but you come out of it and it's not like you're like, yeah, I want to go do that right away again. That's the beauty of psychedelics, is that it's like you get shown all this stuff and then Then you have the offering of whether you're going to integrate it or not, which I actually think the integration aspect of the journeys is more important almost than the journey itself. Because if we don't bring it in, if we don't, bring it here and embody it, the feelings, the understanding, and the letting go of the mental thought constructs, we just recreate them because our external environment will recreate them for us, right? Because that's what we have built. So yeah, sorry, I went on to a long story there, and there's so much more I can
Well,
tell,
that
but
was great. I love those
yeah.
stories. Who was the High Council, though? Was that in the medicine, or was that part of the ceremony? When you said I talked to the High Council, like it was just a standard thing happening here. What was that like?
Yeah, well, it kind of is. I mean, there's like the galactic councils, there's like the high council that you sit with. Not everybody sits with. I mean, you can, it's available to everyone. I guess I felt like I had sat with the high council before, even though I had no like real knowledge of that. And I'd heard other people talk about sitting with the high council. So
Well,
but
just
I don't
describe it
quite.
more because people who haven't experienced that.
Yeah, well,
What
I
was
think
it?
for everyone it can be a little bit different, right? And
Mhm.
our high council can be there's high councils that have very specific representations from starseed families and all that. And I would say that in that session for me, it wasn't like I knew like, oh, you're a Palladian and you're sitting here, and oh, you're a this and you're a that. It wasn't that. It was like it was participating in a high council of beings. I like to look at it as my guides, my higher self. I mean, because everything at the end of the day is a projection. And so there is only one thing, and that is source, right? That is connecting to source and being connected to source. So everything that we see coming down from that dimension is a projection of our mind. But all of these projections can also be helpful, not all of them, but they can be helpful. And so for me, that high council was a council of my higher guides, my starseed family, my people, and I'll get glimpses of them at different times. Sometimes it's like very like on the ground. Like I'll be sitting like, what am I supposed to be doing today? And it's not that I can't come up with a big to-do list of what I need to do. And I'll just sit and you just kind of wait for the message. And I see, for me, I see them at somewhat of a board table. Like they're sitting at a big table. And as you know from psychedelic use, there's also a lot of transmissions that happen that aren't words. So that's why I think it's hard to describe. Like, I can't tell you exactly like, well, here's what we discussed at the high council, because it's not quite like that. It's feeling into, because what we're wanting to do is upgrade our vibration, upgrade our cellular health, upgrade our expanded consciousness, in consciousness, but also in our physical body, right? Our neuroplasticity. Like there's things that we're wanting to heal. We're wanting to reconnect some of our gut, microbiome. Like, so there's things that are happening that you could be sitting at the high council and all of those things could be happening, but you could also be sitting at the high council and they could be telling you some very specific directives. So yeah, it's a little bit of a hard question to answer. There's a lot of people that can actually speak very eloquently about the High Council because they've spent a lot of time putting framework around that. But I also try not to put a lot of framework around some of these concepts, because then I think we're just getting a little bit more involved in concepts, right?
Mhm.
And so that's the idea, is that we're looking to unravel the mind and be here now, right? Ram Dass, be here now, in pure consciousness, in the experience of this moment right now, not the past, not the future. And that's, of course, what we work towards. And it's not always easy because we're human and we have an external environment that is calling our attention to different things, and we still want to participate. Well, I do. I want to participate. I don't want to just sit on a cushion for every day and call it bliss. I like to still go out into the world and contribute and shine the light and show the way.
Yeah, and that's why I asked for people who have any inclination about it, of what it could be. And I loved how it was so much of a simple part of your story. Oh, I sat at the High Council just as much as I sat on the rock, and just as much
Yeah.
as the linen veil came over your shoulder. It was just part of reality, part of the truth
Yeah.
of the journey, and also how you've had access to the High Council. You didn't need psychedelics to get there, but psychedelics sometimes make it an easier access point for people as
Yeah.
well, who maybe
Yeah.
have not experienced. And I don't know, not everyone takes psychedelics and goes to sit at the High Council either. So I think there's a lot of setting expectations. But what also stood out to me was we talk about integration a lot, and I completely agree that integration is incredibly critical. And it's also not actually honoring the journey if you
Yeah.
don't work with it and sit with it. Because you went to the High Council, you got a lot of transmissions, and if the next night or the next week you're going to say, "Oh, I'm going to do more San Pedro because I want to go back to the council," that's not honoring the gift that the High Council invited you in on, because
Yeah.
you didn't sit with it, you didn't dance with it, or
Yeah.
however, draw it or paint it or swim, whatever the integration process that helps you to take in that source energy. You're not honoring that if you don't spend that time to drop into it and work with it. It's like, a degree. You learn
Yeah.
the books and do the things, but then you got to go put it, into practice as well.
Yes.
And also the
Yes.
other thing that stood out was the preparation,
Yeah.
where you didn't know that shaking uh, ashram was actually preparing you for that San Pedro shaking experience.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot to be said about having a little bit of a meditation practice or some breath work experience prior to doing psychedelics, because that helps so much to be familiar with those feelings and those tools
Yes.
when sometimes the psychedelic journey can be confusing.
Yeah, no, I love that you bring that up because I like to talk about the bridge. The bridge is so important. And without a foundation of a spiritual toolbox that builds that bridge, it can get challenging. You get shot out there and you see all this, your world kind of falls apart in a good way at the time. But when you come back here and you're looking around yourself and no one else sees things any differently, it can be a real challenge. And so when you built that spiritual toolbox, like you just said, through maybe it's breath work, maybe it's a meditation practice, it's something that you can go back to that gets you back into that quiet space and that inner peace and that inner wisdom, because that's the North Star we're looking to hit, is to be able to bring, the peace that passes all understanding, that keeps our hearts and minds open to this moment now, while still participating in this third dimensional realm with other humans, with environmental factors that we have to navigate, and that we still want to remain peaceful, and we still need to respond. If a lion is chasing us, we need to know to run. But yeah, so I'm with you on the bridge. It's so important. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times that emphasis doesn't get made with some of the servers. And maybe that's something else we can talk about, and I'm sure you've talked about it a lot. But there's people that go do psychedelics and then all of a sudden they think that they're oh so enlightened, and then they're all of a sudden a server. And psychedelics will not enlighten you. Psychedelics will give you the North Star and show you the way, but you still have to do the work. So wherever you started out, you get open to a lot of ideas, but you're still going to come back to some element of that level of vibration until you, in your own conscious mind, can actually incorporate and embody the concepts here and now. And so, unfortunately, I think that it's become a little bit new agey. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm a shaman and I can serve," and it's like, something like ayahuasca. I mean, that comes down ancestral lineages, and people get trained for lifetimes to be able to serve that medicine. And I think in honoring the medicine, we need to really have respect for the power of what it can do for us. And so that's where the server comes in really, really important. And also, to your point, the integration aspect of it after the ceremony. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
I think that's one of the biggest red flags that happened in the 60s in the first psychedelic revolution, was that everyone didn't appreciate the integration part of it, but also it was such a new cultural revolution that they didn't integrate it as a tool rather than this is the end all and be all
Yeah.
of. I mean, if you remember the great Ram Dass
Yeah.
talk when he talked about giving his guru LSD, and the guru was just popping it and being like, "No big deal.
Yeah.
I've already been in this realm for so long." And I think from a Western standpoint, we're not really in those realms that the guru was in, and even Ram Dass, that was his point of being like, "Oh, I can't believe this, that it's not
Yeah.
having the same effect on it," when he's actually so tapped into source. The psychedelics could be a tool to help you get tapped into source, but it's not going to transform you into a conscious being without
Right.
the work that you do on yourself and with your ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think what is also coming up frequently, is that in these podcasts is about the frequency, where the people who I try to bring on are people who are really wise in this space and can share wisdom. And there's not the frequency of use is. Are you still with me, Beth?
Yeah. Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, we dropped off.
Oh.
I can hear you fine. The camera.
I could hear you the whole time. Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about, again, the frequency of use and how to maturely approach the use of psychedelics, and it's not to repeat, rinse, wash, and repeat, but it's to really embody the experience and the wisdom that was imparted you during that journey, and to work with it and to integrate it, which is what you were saying before.
Yeah, and I think for me, that a couple of thoughts. One, just on that, is oftentimes, after a period of time, after a psychedelic journey, we can really get back into that mind space of our own mind in a lower vibration. And what I really focus on doing is, when I feel like I'm not in that higher vibrational realm, is not go to psychedelics. Like, I intentionally don't go to a psychedelic journey because I'm feeling lower. I'm feeling like my mind is super strong, because that's where the great work is really done, where you can really dig in to, well, why is this coming up? Okay, welcome it. I'm welcoming my mind coming online really strong right now. I know I could go do a psychedelic journey and I could blow that up, shut that default mode network down, and understand more. But if I couldn't get it and understand it from the last session, going out there and coming back isn't going to change that. So we still want to heal it here and now. So yes, I think that's so important. And I also think you made a great point about just like the 60s and 70s and, how that all came down the line. I mean, it was first LSD came from, as we know, a lab, a proper pharmaceutical lab, and was sent to a lot of psychiatrists for use with their patients. And then it got out into a party scene. And maybe some people will say that this is a judgment, because I guess technically it is, but I don't see psychedelics as a recreational. I think, in my opinion, is that it starts to go on to the drug section and less onto the spiritual medicine section, because if you're not in awareness of your space, your set and your setting, you're in an environment where everybody's opening themselves up. So another topic that I like to share and talk about, but not to create fear, but to create discernment and awareness, is that when we open our soul via these medicines, we can bring entities through and in that attach to us. Lots of funny business can happen, in ceremonies. Other people's stuff can transfer onto you, right? So if you're out at a rave and you're at Woodstock and you're with all of these people, there's, yes, a beautiful feeling probably of oneness, and everybody's in that oneness together, but there's also a bunch of like shit coming off of people too, right? And coming into people, and it's like it becomes a real big cesspool. Even though it feels like love and light, and there's an element of that it truly is, there's still the other stuff that's happening. And so I think it's so important for people to really recognize these medicines as soul medicines and see them as a very sacred opportunity to open themselves up. But when you open yourself up, to also come back here and and recognize, well, what environment am I in, and what do I want to open my soul up to? So yeah, I feel like that was a big downfall of the 60s and 70s was the recreational aspect, because then it didn't bring the integration work potentially. I mean, I'm not saying everybody. I'm sure there was a lot of people that did great integration work and were able to sustain, but because it became sort of the social construct to go do a party and do drugs, that was, yeah, that just was accepted as the way that you use them in
I
a,
disagree with that a little bit, though. And let
yeah,
me push back on that. Is that I
yeah,
can see, I think it has to do with also age as well, where I've had incredible recreational experiences in my youth when I was younger, in my
yeah,
20s. And I'm not in that mental space now where I would not want to really take a large dose psychedelic and go to a concert, because I'm also not in the same like vibe I was when I was going to a concert when I was in my 20s,
yeah,
right? And I think that that has a big difference as well. It's where you are like in the arc of your life on how you approach these medicines, because if you when you were in your 20s, you weren't in the same spiritual path as you are a few years ago when you entered into the psychedelic world. Whereas psychedelics, I think, can be really fun to go, have with your friends on a camping trip, and not make it about trying to get to the high council. But it can also have, I think I think there's a whole dichotomy of, there's no right way to use psychedelics, as long as you're using them safely and with intention. And if your intention is just to laugh and have a great time with your buddies, that's enough sometimes, right?
yeah. 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 I mean, I kind of knew, that's why I was saying, I might be perceived as a judgment. And it is a judgment on my part, because I do see them as really sacred, but there's different doses, there's different types of psychedelics. And
That's true.
I'm with you, like, to sit around. I just had this conversation with someone who does, more micro middle dosing and sits with their buddies and has a great time. And so that's great too, because I think that helps you embody being here, right? As opposed to just shooting yourself out. So I'm not saying that we can't do that. I'm just saying that for me, when we're at a big concert filled with tons of people with lots of different energies and entities and different things, it's just not a place that I would recommend people opening themselves up to. But yes, you know what? Here's the beauty of it. We're all on a journey, and we're all going to do the journey in our own way. There's like thousands and thousands and thousands of ways to get back home. So yeah, it's going to happen for people in the way that it's meant to. I just like for people to understand some of the things that do happen with entities in the other realms, because it is something to just have an awareness around. But with that said, one of the things that I really wish, it's going to sound crazy. Well, you're not going to think it sounds crazy, but I feel that it would be wonderful that at 18, when you graduate from high school, that you have a psychedelic assisted journey. It's like, why would you not at 18 want to clear out all the stuff, right? Because we know we get programmed by our parents and their whole thought, constructs and all of that, when, up until 5 to 7, right? So we know that all got ingrained in us. So why at 18, when we sort of have that rite of passage to just kind of go, oh, let me clear out the stuff that isn't serving me. Let me figure out who I really am and what my mission and purpose is. And then, right. So I almost feel like, and I'm not trying to say like we need to have like an age or a time or a set. I'm just saying, like, just because 18 and graduation is sort of like a point in time. Wouldn't that be lovely if we could just clear some of that stuff and then go into college and, do that routine or whatever the routine is. And then, yeah. And then we go
I think
into a
it's the
relationship and we get married, and then maybe we have like a couple's journey, and we just kind of keep cleaning up the mind. Like, why don't we do that? Why can't we just go in and just periodically just say, yeah, we're just going to go take a little look at what ideas we got ingrained in our head that are not serving us.
I think it would be wonderful, and I think that might naturally evolve that way as we've lost so many rituals, and they speak about this so much with men,
Yeah.
particularly because we don't have the male community where we used to go hunt together or used to sit in circle or do anything together.
Yeah.
You really have to manufacture a gathering of men together to do something fun, and it's not that easy to do. And as you get older, it's even really harder to do. It maybe
Yeah.
happen once a year with some old friends if everyone can afford to go skiing or
Yeah.
something like that and find time to get away. Whereas, and I approach this too. I have two teenage kids, So I approach it with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, right? So
Yeah.
there's an element of wanting them to grow up and to become mature beings without psychedelics, but also know that it's not something to be scared of. But at the same time, like if my son who's 14 started doing psychedelics, I'd be quite concerned, right? So because he wouldn't be ready his brain is not mature enough. And I
Yeah.
think that's what you also mean, like 18, like you're mature, your brain is mature. Your brain's not mature at 15,
Yeah.
and you're not I mean, but a lot of people who have a lot of wisdom in this space actually did some psychedelics pretty early on, and some of the
Yeah.
wisest people I know were doing psychedelics before they're 18. So there's no right or wrong
Right.
pathway. Again, it's all freedom. I think what I really want in the field is to decriminalize these plants and medicines so people don't go to jail for making choices to heal themselves mentally or to expand their minds consciously
Yeah.
without getting in trouble with the law. And that's
Yeah.
like the first and foremost area of my work in this space is to change that war on drugs
Yeah.
for marginalized communities as well. I feel from a position of privilege as a white male to it's my duty to look out for the marginalized communities and the poor and allow affordable access as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great mission. Yeah.
But I agree about the ritual part, and I think that that may be something that develops more and more and becomes a little bit more of a accepted method. I know some people have instituted that. I know I'm not going to name names, but I know a friend of mine, as his son turned, I think 14 or something, did a peyote journey with him, but it was in a very much of a rite of passage manner. I would not do that with my own son, but I respected him. That's what he
Yeah.
wanted to do, and I guess the son had a great time and really felt like stepping into being a man in that cycle.
Yeah.
And I can see it with relationships as well. I feel like this will be a very much a tool for relationship
Yeah.
development and connection.
Yeah, for sure. What comes to mind to share about that is I sat with the Huni Queen. I don't know if you're familiar with the Huni Queen, but it's a incredible woman server shaman from the Amazon that was brought here. She doesn't speak any English, and she usually has her children um, with her in ceremony doing the music. And she brought one of her children, her son, who I believe he was 21 or something. He looks like he's 15, and she was like 40 something, and she looks like she's 25. And they did the ceremony, and it was the most incredible ceremony. And the power that young man, demonstrated in the ceremony was just like, wow. But I had to watch my own mind, you know, oh, well, I have a judgment against that. Oh my goodness. Like, oh, wow, these guys, and, they start their kids on this when I don't remember what the age is now, but like 9 or something. Right. And so my mind came in and wanted to judge that. And then I'm like, you know what, Beth, one of the things that you've been taught through psychedelics is everyone has free will. Let people do their journey, right? You can provide your opinion, and you can provide your guidance, and you can provide your insights, and you can provide whatever, you've experienced through your lens, which is what we're doing here today, right? But at the end of the day, everybody's going to do it their way, as they should, because it's their free will, and they're the creator of their universe, and I'm the creator of mine. And whatever we can do to help support each other, I think, is really the point, right? and
Mhm.
and it's about reducing the judgments, and and all the things that the mind brings in, especially in today's times with everything that's going on. Because I see all of this, what's happening right now, as huge distractors. They're distractors to awakening. It's all distractor, right? It's like, let's not put any time on those things. Why would we do that? Let's go to the awakening aspects. Let's go to, I don't know if I can swear on your show, but it's not technically my words, but my spiritual healer, who is not about the psychedelic realm, he said to me from the day I met him back in 2005, he said, Beth, we have one goal here. It's to be the happiest motherfuckers on earth.
Mhm.
And I was like, I was not expecting my spiritual healer to say that.
Yeah.
But, he's right. It's like, we're here to have a human experience and to be in the bliss of divine oneness. And along the way, we're going to get some ups, some downs, some sideways, some unexpected, and it's in my mind, it's about and this, I don't want to focus on the word quickly, but how quickly can we get back to neutral state, right? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, we got to be happy. We got to be happy. And it's like, we just need to be neutral. We just need to be like in a blissfully aware state, which doesn't mean that like we're always on a super high. No, it's like we just need to be neutral, and just it's always about what's our reaction to our external environment. What are we calling in? And looking at what's in our external environment is a reflection of what's in our internal environment. And when the internal environment is peaceful, then other things will be peaceful. Even it may not be peaceful out there for someone else, but we can still see peace within it. And that's where I think we're at with humanity. And when a lot of the conscious community talks about this separation, not separation from source necessarily, but separation from, people who are going to fall into the abyss and the people who are going to rise above, whatever. It's really just our lens of which how we see the world that's going to bring that peace within each person, and then it will be our role as I don't know what the words are that you like to use, but light worker, way shower, enlightened beings. That's where we come in to shine the light and show the way, right? Because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's the same with our brothers and sisters on the planet. So if we can give them some guidance, we can give them a road that we've traveled, and then they can make their own decisions. And so, some people are making decisions to stay very asleep because in their mind, their mind is wound so tightly that they think that going back to any of the suffering, that they have to be in the suffering. And it's like, no, all you need to do is walk through the suffering, right? Mm-hmm. Let the suffering go. But a lot of people don't know who they are without their stories. And the stories, unfortunately, a lot of times are suffering. There are suffering stories. And so that's again where I think psychedelics can come in and just be this incredible pattern disruptor, right? It just pattern disrupts a circuitous loops of thought that we didn't know were happening. They're loops that are happening. We don't know that. I mean, sometimes we know that they're happening. That's even more frustrating because you're like, I know what's happening. Why can't I stop it? Right. But it's so for people who have not done any spiritual work, I'm not saying don't do psychedelics. It may be the perfect time for you to step in. Psychedelics may be the awakening kiss for someone else, right? Mm-hmm. It might be that one thing that just resets, and they feel the energy back in their body, because we numb our bodies so much, right? We numb our bodies with nutrition and whatever. That's all different topics, but there's lots of, but it's our thoughts. We want to get our thoughts, our minds open, which is why I have on the book Unraveling the Mind, to unveil illusions. And then we go, oh, now we know who we really are, right? As one with source, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And it's just a journey to continue to keep ourselves pointed to that North Star.
I think there is something to be said about quickening the pace of awakening for humanity, because there is a race against the darkness in terms of treating the earth and protecting the earth, and it's not like it's all light and love. I mean, right. There's a way to and the way that you do that is by awakening yourself.
Yes.
And spreading the messages of your awakening, like through your book. And the other thing that came up that I wanted to touch on, and when we talk about that, the queen you mentioned, the Honey Queen, is that
Honey Queen? Yeah.
Honey Queen. That their culture brought up where that it was completely normal and natural for those children to be involved in that ceremony at 9. And I know that there's a little bit of a movement of mushroom babies and people who introduce it to their children, microdosing possibly, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's the path that they want to bring into their family. And I think that that's where we should be really open-minded and not say, oh, medically this is wrong, and looking from a Western perspective. I think it should just be, as long as it's done thoughtfully and safely and in a container of intention, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it's a cultural element as well. But as we change culture and our culture evolves, these things will change as well. And I think it's just being really open-minded about there's no right or wrong way to do this as long as it's done safely.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. And yeah, I think a couple of thoughts were coming to me, but a couple of thoughts were coming to me about that. But I think that coming from my background in big pharma, which anybody today would go, "What? You worked in big pharma? How's that possible?" And anybody in big pharma would go, "What? You're a flower whisperer and you're what?" So it's an interesting dichotomy that I have about myself. But I do like clinical data. I do like to
Exactly.
know what's happening because I'm also a huge advocate of preserving brain chemistry.
Hmm.
And as you said, a child at 14 is still developing, and we don't know what the effects are, right? Could be positive, could be negative, could be neutral. We don't know. So but there's also a catch to clinical data because sometimes things get too clinical, and then we're doing things in a way that's not natural. So I'm not saying like we need to have clinical data on everything, but I do like to have some touch points of understanding. Um, yeah, what is it?
I
Just like
think
I
it's
would
a
love
good.
to have more. Go
It's
ahead.
the merging of the ancient wisdom and the modern wisdom, and it's great. I mean, the idea about the studies that have gone on with psilocybin and depression,
Mhm.
and that clinical work, and with alcoholism, and I mean, you name it, anxiety, all the
Yeah,
indications that we all suffer from, PTSD and MDMA, that has really helped people advance who have PTSD come to this space. But the if you look at like the ancient Mayans had pictures of pregnant women sitting on mushrooms as well. So
yeah,
what was that experience as well? I mean, the knowledge base we know is so minimal for what all the spiritual realms that we're talking about, that
yes,
for one group to say we're right and the other group is wrong is not the position to be holding. But I think the clinical data is a really huge step forward, and then we'll we can expand on that with stacking and adding other other plants to a stacking formula for doing psilocybin or
yeah,
MDMA. I know, like, even like roll kits. I mean, those things are fantastic if you're going to do an MDMA journey, so you don't have
yeah,
that whole serotonin loss. And
yeah,
after that, and the I love the like the home scientist around this space. I mean, when you talk about people making tinctures and all these different products, that they're these garage chemists that know so much
yeah,
information about neurotropics and
yeah,
all these things. I don't even know the words to describe it, but there's people who are really dedicated to making a better experience and more knowledgeable experience, which will only include the set and setting. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of the cannabis industry from back in the day when it was just a, a, a bag of weed, to knowing the cannabinoids in each
yeah,
strain, and what this one will make you feel like versus this version. And I could see the same developing. I mean, with all the strains of psilocybin, I think there's like 100 different, at least 100 different strains of psychedelic mushrooms. And you look at I mean, I'm not sure how much experience you've had with psilocybin, but that's generally my more experience for me. But if you take like a penis envy versus
yeah,
any of the others, they're different experiences, and certainly different doses have different
yeah,
experiences. And I really believe actually that in the future we'll have it like that, like in 10, 20, 30 years we'll be like, for to treat depression you want to take X amount of penis envy made in a tea, and that's
yeah,
the best way to do that. Whereas if you
yeah,
want to go dance, you take
yeah,
another molecule at
yeah,
this amount, and before you do that, you drink a cup of coffee or
yeah,
whatever the solution
yeah,
will be. I'm sure it'll be much more advanced than that. Like,
yeah,
you look at like where we can go with this is just going to be more knowledgeable and more experience and more tweaking to have
yeah,
the exact experience you're looking for, and take out some of the guessing a little bit, whereas it used to be just complete guesswork. I mean, back in the original day, I love that meme where they say, like, the original mushroom, these ones killed Joe, these ones saw God. Like,
yeah,
they had to
yeah,
try to kill Joe ones first, right?
yeah. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying about all of that. I think the other thing to add to it is there's a bit of a rub, I think, about what's happening with the psychedelic pharmaceutical companies. And intellectually, I totally get it and it makes sense. But the part that I don't like right now is that there is an aspect of nature's molecules that I wish that we would study more about that. And some people aren't. The companies, most of the money is going towards something that's tweaked so that they can have exclusivity on a patent. And while that is good, because we could take something out and say, okay, this is good for Alzheimer's, like you said, right? But there's also the element of what if it's just taking mushrooms and, as you said, stacking them, right? And it's something that's not patentable. I would love to have money that is set aside for the research to just do that, because Mother Nature actually knows what's best, probably in most cases before our human mind. I mean, of course, there's our mind plays in this in a good way too, but yeah, it's like, why can't we just have more data on the medicines as they exist, as Mother Nature is serving them to us? And that's something that we're not necessarily getting because the money's going for patentability and, you know, and tweaking and making it a little bit special, which again isn't bad. It's just, you know, why can't we all just grow mushrooms in our backyard? Why can't we take mushrooms as a nutritional supplement like we do other things that we grow that aren't patentable? You know, like it's just yeah. So that's the part where it's like, and I come from big pharma, so I get it. And there's business that needs to be done to some degree, but wouldn't it be great if we just had lots of money that just went into understanding how we could just be happier in humanity through natural products that exist through Mother Nature? I don't know. It seems kind of easy to me, but
I think that that's the conscious shift, though, and there are certainly people who are doing the citizen science research that you're talking about, but not on a big scale like that's getting funded by like the NIH or anything like that. And that's the shift. I mean, if you look at the Pentagon's budget, I mean, they I just saw recently they have always failed their audit, but they're off by like $10 trillion.
yeah,
It's not close. Like, where's that 10 trillion going to? It's going to weapons and trying to enhance our systems of control.
yeah,
And I think that's the conscious awakening that hopefully happens on this planet. And that's why I meant like the quickening of the pace,
yeah,
because that needs to come to an end fast. And you're still going to have your Putins and your other people who want to go towards totalitarian states. And that's kind of the battle we're in my mind, of when I look at the fear of people being unaware until it's too late
yeah.
that you're in that situation. But I don't know. The
Or
path is
or fully aware and just letting it go, and letting it happen. Yeah, and I think I'm with you on all that. I don't think there's a point of contention at all. I just feel compelled to say, like, we just need to come back to ourselves, because, and I'm not saying you're worrying about Putin. Well, I mean, we all worry about Putin to some degree, right? I mean, like, that would
yeah.
just
You're
be a
not.
human
You're
nature
crazy.
thing,
It's a scary
right?
component of the world.
Yeah. But yet our energy needs to go to our own awakening. And I'm with you on saying, like, there is a sense of urgency in this. It doesn't have to be, but why not? Why would we not want to elevate our consciousness? And, one of the other things that was talked about at that conference was the AI aspect of things. And, and people always looking for something outside of themselves. And that narrative is being sold right now, that, oh, you need a chip to upgrade, you need a this to upgrade. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, you have everything innately within you. Don't mess with what you've been given. Just accentuate that. Just find, everything's out there for you to rise to a higher consciousness level. So yeah, so I think, that's an interesting thing. And then of course, like things like the metaverse and these other, constructs that are coming, that are taking away our humanness, right? That are taking away our interaction as a human in this dimension, that will only bring a whole nother level of mind mess for us, a whole nother level of detachment. Another thing that when I talk about brain chemistry, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert on brain chemistry, But my knowledge and my insights are that we don't focus enough on oxytocin.
Hmm.
And I think with medicines, and I haven't seen data specifically to see what the spikes are, but oxytocin and cortisol work together as balancing hormones. And everyone's familiar with cortisol because, oh, that's the stress hormone, right? That's the fight or flight. But a lot of people aren't thinking about the oxytocin. And the oxytocin hormone is the, known as the cuddle drug, if you will, because that's like a lot of times for, babies latching on for lactation when they're newborns. But it's also, it's free and easy to get your brain to squirt oxytocin if we just pay attention to it. And it's easy. It's things like hugs, touch, sex,
Hmm.
intimacy with others, eye contact, right? Just feeling seen, feeling heard. These are all free things that we can do. We don't need to go and get an oxytocin prescription, but we don't focus on that. People don't talk about, hey, like, how much did you get touched today? In fact, it's the opposite. Like, oh, you might be inappropriately touched. It's like, oh my goodness. Oh, you might have inappropriately looked at me too long at work. And now it might be harassment. It's like, okay. And I'm not discounting because those things do happen. So I'm
No,
not, I'm not
I
trying
know
to,
you're not. I know you're not, because there's a very, I mean, I link it back to the rise in porn as well, because it's really screwed up our entire society, and particularly from a male point of view, on what is appropriate idea of a picture of sex. And
yeah,
I'm older, so like I already had an idea of sex before porn came
yeah,
in, but I look at the generation that's coming up, and it's disgusting. And it's almost
yeah,
like a mind control for like keeping men down and not being able
yeah,
to relate to their feminine side and to women, and
yeah,
sex is playful and sex is joyful, and sex is not as just like a dominating role or
right.
a weird fetish or something, just something
Yeah,
that's beautiful, right, and
yeah,
fun between two friends and lovers. And I think that
yeah,
that message has not really been taught to younger generations. And you see that as like women see men now more as weak because men don't have those skill sets of just being able to interact with the
yeah,
woman, and not to touch her appropriately in a social setting. It's okay
yeah,
to hug a friend or whatever. I mean, it's
yeah,
just weird. That's why it's all like, you have to discuss the consent around it all, because people haven't been taught how to do consent.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, or people have been taught to use their sexual energy as manipulation. So, yeah, it kind of goes, it's
Both
a
ways.
huge conversation, right? Yeah, it's an interesting time, but that's where I think COVID also just played such an incredible role for us, is to understand what happens when we are isolated from others, whether you were in your house by yourself or you were in your house with other people. When we got shut off from our external environment, that brought up a lot for people, and they either decided to take the lessons or they didn't. And the people who didn't, are in a deeper suffering than the people who did and said, oh, okay, I get that. I want to understand that aspect about myself more, whatever that is, because we all had to reflect on the four walls we've built
Mhm.
and who's in them or not in them during that time. So yeah, it was huge. So I don't know how I got onto that, but um,
But I think
it's all,
it's going to be a big blessing in the end, because it has reshaped society and has also shown that now, particularly with all the vaccine information that's coming out, is like what the line of BS we were fed around that as well,
yeah,
and all the trying to control our freedom. And it's a real
yeah,
battle for that. It's the freedom, the same. When I look at psychedelics, and maybe we can just move into this discussion to finish up, is that I really look at promoting women voices in the space. And I'm really,
mm,
and part of that is because when I take psychedelics, when I get into a psychedelic field, I really connect with the divine feminine energy, and the feminine that includes of the earth,
mm,
the large earth
yeah,
feminine nature energy is the same energy that's in psychedelics for me. And it's the same energy that's in, when you're making love to a woman. It's the divine
yeah,
feminine aspect of that. And that's real freedom. To
yeah.
be in that space is freedom. It's the ability for that energy to play and be spontaneous, and that is like as free as you could be when you're in the divine feminine energy field.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that to say that, when we're in a tantric sexual, sensual, energetic exchange, our mind is usually not there.
Right.
And that is an incredibly blissful place because then we're just souls
Heart
sharing.
energy. It's a heart exchange.
Yes. And your oxytocin levels are going up. And I think a session of tantric sexual sensuality, it doesn't even have to be, intercourse or actual sex, but that energetic exchange, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling, just being able to express yourself energetically from your heart, as you said, that's the gym you want to go to. That's where you want to be, because that just helps you exude out into your life to everyone
It was
that
like
love and
the
that light.
goddess temples and rituals in the ancient times.
Yeah,
That's what it was. I mean, you were 18, you would go spend some time in a goddess temple and learn all those skills and how to interact, before they sent
yeah,
you back out into the world.
yes,
And
yes,
that's gone. I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately, but that's the joy of freedom. And then when you get back to getting your food from the earth and living in that connection as well, which we're really lacking in terms of how we, our food chain and the quality of that food
yeah,
affects our whole body. I mean, 90% of our serotonin comes from our gut, and these chemicals, the natural flow of sensuality and play and dance is something that we're all looking to bring back into
yeah,
the connection of community as well.
yes, yes.
But we're
Well,
moving in the right direction. We're
we
having
are.
discussions about it, and people are experiencing, and people are doing work on themselves, addressing where there's fear, and trying to move into love. I think, at least in the conscious community, and that's where we more and more people are coming into the tent.
Yep.
And your book's like
Yeah,
your
I mean, I
book
think
right
you're
into
you're
that.
right, and I think people are either having to choose, like, do I want to stay in the suffering, right, or do I? There's got to be another way, right? That's what people say when they're on their knees. There's got to be another way, and spirit's just sitting there going, and I got it. It's right here. All you have to do is surrender to it, and that's the mind that comes in to say, no, I got to do it on my own, and you don't have to do it on your own. You're not equipped to do it on your own. Your mind thinks it is, but it's not. And I think, yeah, that's where psychedelics can really just help people unravel that tightly woven mind and see the illusions that are out there.
I did an interview with Grandma Jyoti Ma, who's a wisdom keeper and a real spiritual leader, and she was talking about, there's a big like 26,000 year cycle that we're in the very end of it, and in the next 3 years is like it's like a cleanse and preparation for this
Mm,
new awakening, and a lot of what we're doing is we're cleansing. We're
yeah,
clearing out these old patterns and paradigms on an individual basis, and then that is also supporting the collective.
yeah,
So the work that you're doing is working for the whole collective as well as you do it for yourself, because that's the only cleanse you can really take on, right? It's you
yep,
and me, and
yep,
each of our own souls is going through this. And like you said, the people who are choosing to step into that is are really benefiting, but also having some hard times because it's not
yeah,
easy.
yeah, yeah. And that's where I think it's great that we can all, band together and support each other through your show, through my book, through my YouTube channel, where, come, let's be in communion. Let's talk the talk, let's walk the walk and embody the concepts, because yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful time on earth right now to be here and to be participating, even though sometimes the chaos out there feels a little too much, and the power of the mind, comes in. But yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful time to step into the work.
Yeah. Well, then you cry and then you dance and then you move through it and you call your friend and you rely on people. I mean, you're not alone. There's a lot of resources for
Yeah,
everybody. And I think that as we, what also COVID showed us is how much we want community. And I
yeah,
think that, like, before I was even stepping back, and now any community activity, I'm going to be more likely to sign up for,
yeah,
to meet other people, other conscious people, and just be aware and expand my friendship circles, which I'm certainly doing. So it's been great to get to know you a little bit on this podcast, and I really appreciate your time and joining me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I'm so glad we did this, and I look forward to whatever else the universe has in store to swirl together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.